Hello,
Okay.
Mohammad Hassan. I'm delighted to welcome you as the keynote speaker of the 6th edition of the Data Innovation Summit. So let's start. Could you please tell us a bit more about yourself and the Federal Competitiveness and Statistics Center?
Thank you, Ivana. It is a pleasure to be here with you virtually. And thank you for having me. And I look really forward to the Data Innovation Summit in October 2021. Most countries have National Statistics Center or offices, and it's actually the traditional model of making decisions depending on the data that has been collected in a scientific way. And the National Statistic Office around the world works under the umbrella of the United Nations Statistical Commission to produce economic, social indicators, and many other indicators. But in the United Arab Emirates, we always look forward to be an innovative hub in all sectors. And one of them is actually data. So when the Federal Competitiveness and Statistics Center established 6 years back, we had three mandates. One is the statistics and data. Second is the competitiveness, to look at the UAE position and enhance it internationally. Third, managing the sustainable development goal with the UAE government and the world. If we go back to the first mandate of the statistical and data that we work on, the differences we make in the statistical sector in the United Arab Emirates is that we created a center within the center itself, and we call it a future of data. And we put a group of data scientists in this centers to work and look at the statistics, but in a different way, to look at the data in a specific. Many will argue that there is a difference between statistics and data, and we'll explain that in a bit more detail later on. But the Future of Data Center, or the concept that we established, their job is to look at how can we really promote a practical use of a different sources of data, such as big data, and that include cross-border data, not only within the country, but I'm talking about around the world, while at the same time we're trying to build on existing precedents of finding solution for many existing challenging in the big data. That include methodological issues, covering quality concern of the big data and the data analytics that will require different breed of data scientists. The other part also important, which is the challenge that we looked at when it comes to data, is the legal and the issue in respect of access of data sources, because government is no more the owner of all the data. Most of the big data now today is actually produced by private sector, not governments. The focus also of this center was the privacy issues, in particular those relevant to the use and the reuse of data, and of course personal and sensitive data. So the important objectives of this was to build a public trust in the use of big data, and at the same time statistics itself, to develop an international methodologies of the use of the big data on official statistics in the countries. The second mandate was to enhance the country position with a global competitiveness report and indicators, where we look at the UAE positions compared to other countries and make sure that we are trying to lead in every sectors. And the third mandate was aiming to support the world in achieving the Sustainable Development Goal and the capacity as the General Secretariat of the National Committee of Sustainable Development Goals.
That's great. Thank you for providing the detailed answer. So data, without doubt, is disrupting every part of our life. And from your experience, how has data disrupted the public and private sectors at the UAE?
This is an interesting question, but before we go into how data really disrupted both public and private sector, let us go back first in history to understand how data disruption happened. Mm-hmm. If you remember in 2008, 2009, we have seen a new wave of technological changes, such as introduction of social media like Instagram, the new messaging technology like WhatsApp, or new tools that society start using like Airbnb and Uber, and many Internet of Things sensors and devices that came in. And at the same years, we did not notice a huge jump in using this digital media in a daily usage. But the societies, after a couple of 3 to 4 years back, and to be precise, in 2013, we saw a huge curve or exponential curve of using the digital media. And that increased dramatically. And as we are humans start using a lot of these new technological devices, or tools, we start producing a lot of data. And today, according to Forbes, we produce around 4.4 zettabytes of data. And if we put zeros around that, this is 21 zeros. So you could do the math and see how big is the data that we produce as a humanities. And actually, who owns this data today? It's scattered in many different platforms. So in a simple word, in previous years, if we look at government used to be the only service provider, and we used to own a lot of data because we provide services to our people, and people like mandatory start using these services. But today there is a game changer, and private sector start owning data more than the public sector or the government, because they maintain higher percentage of services used by societies. As I mentioned, people start using Uber, which is purely private sector, but before, all the taxis used to own by government, for example. So that's the model which is being changed. The other side of the coin is the disruption that's happened in private sectors, because the data today is fragmented. There is no one private sector entity owns all the data. So what happens is that no one has the full picture of the truth due to multiple sources of data, and private sector today guard their data and secure it because of the market competitions. So let me give you also a simple example here. All the big consumer retailers like supermarkets that we have in different countries don't have the full picture of what consumers want or actually buy, because most of them, they start buying online, they start buying from the convenience store next
Yeah.
to them, and for many other reasons, none of the retail actually sharing the data because they want to compete with each other, and no one knows the consumer purchase behavior. So we start seeing new companies that start buying data from all these retailers. And what they do, they compile this data, they analyze it, and they start reselling it to the retail in the market. So you can see that because what happened, the retailer want to see the full picture and no one has the full data. So these new type of companies came in, which they start doing the data monetizations. The availability of high data and the adoption of emerging technologies to collect, process, and derive insight offers numerous opportunities for private sector and public sector. It can help actually enhance decision makings, improve output, and support at the same time the growth in different sectors, regardless if it's economics or social. And at the same time, it requires capacity to radically shift the behaviors that and the way that we deal with data. To overcome this conflict of data disruption, there has to be an alignment of data sharing between private sectors and public sector. And the best example we have seen during actually COVID-19, whereby we saw, for example, Google shared their mobility data of all the countries around the world, and it was public data. But they've taken in consideration there is no sensitive or private information of people to be shared when they share their data, and that actually helped governments and policymakers to monitor the impact of movement restrictions. So what happened in most of the countries during COVID, we noticed they introduced a movement restriction, for example. How could we really see the behavior of people if we don't monitor the way that they behave when we do a restriction in certain areas? So Google helped the entire world by sharing their mobility data for country to see the impact of their new policy or restriction in terms of releasing these type of policies or policies in the countries. So moral of the story is that such alignment of data sharing between government and private sector needs to be governed in a way that does not jeopardize the private information of people and ensure the protection of a private sector business, because we don't want to lose the competition of private sectors competing with each others. So what I think is we can create a new era of data interoperabilities that addresses the ability of systems and services to create this concept of data exchange between both sectors.
Great. That was an amazing example with the Google and the conclusion. But zooming in on your data innovation session, you're going to talk about the future foresight of data disruption, where you also talk about disruption versus innovation. So in short, could you tell us what the difference is between data disruption and data innovation?
Sure. Let's first maybe understand the differences between both innovation and disruption, and we'll explain it in a simple stories also.
Mhm.
Imagine we have a washing machine, and as a rule of thumb, you need soap and you need water in order for the machine to wash the clothes, correct? So in previous year, we used to see a washing machine making, if you remember, the washing machine used to make an earthquake beneath it when it's actually start spinning,
Yeah.
right? And and we needed to move the clothes from the washing to a drying, and it used to be manually. So far, we've been doing the same things, but in a better way, an innovative way, and this is what we call actually innovations. So the innovation of the washing machine enhanced year after year, and today we can control the washing machine using the phone, and at the same time we could see there's automatic colorful buttons that's
Mhm.
available in the washing machine, and simply we just press a button and automatically everything happened, right? But
Mhm.
with all this innovation, we still need to add soap and water to wash the clothes, correct? Then when is the disruption will happen? Disruption will happen when a person or someone comes up with a washing machine that does not require soap, for example. It is doing new things that makes the old things obsolete, and that's what we call disruption. Disruption is never one feature or one innovation things to
Mhm.
be added. Disruption is always reached to a tipping point at the go to the market, and your existing skills that require to process are no longer relevant here. So data disruption is, if we take that example and put it in data disruption is when data scientists will be able to do successfully and have an impact that a traditional way of doing statistics or data analysis become obsolete. In summary, the collection of data and the translation of data into meaningful insight is propelling new discoveries. And we see a lot of new data scientists that, especially this new job of data scientists. Previously, we used to call them data analysis,
Yeah.
statisticians, but today we call them data scientists. And they're playing a role in disrupting the rule across various industries. And once we have a real-time data analysis and statistics, then the old fashion of doing statistics that we are, or the National Statistic Office are doing, will be totally obsolete. And that's the disruption that we are going to see when it comes to data.
It was an interesting example with the washing machine you presented, but it explained really clearly the difference. But how developing future foresight has helped you deal with data disruption challenges?
In the UAE, the government actually work employing relevant tools to shape the futures. And it helps us in forecasting the opportunities and look at the trend around us and to challenge our future application and analyze these type of impacts. That help us in developing innovation solutions and providing alternatives. It aims to assist us in enhancing the planning for us by putting a scenario planning for the future. Data foresight is the ability to predict what data we produce will be needed in the futures. The UAE government developed a full platforms and tools to develop scenario planning of a future foresight. It's not the strategies. Future foresight or foresight by itself, it's a scenarios, developing a scenario, a practical scenarios, but not for the next 3 years, but actually 10 years and plus. And that scenario will help us to read a weak signals, or what we call it today is a global trend that is happening around us, and how can we really develop a scenarios of a prediction that will impact us in the next 10 to 15 years. There is it's not a strategy planning as I mentioned, but more of a thinking about the likely changes that is going to happen in the external environments and how these trends could
Mhm.
affect us. Foresight help us as organization navigate the changes that has been given an early warning to us, or what are the obstacle and opportunities ahead. COVID is a simple example. No one predicted the scenario of pandemic, right? But what happened is that people took or country took the event itself and looked at the opportunities that we can develop beyond this pandemic. And as I mentioned earlier, we as a center are consistently seeking innovation or in terms of data sources through the future of data center that I mentioned earlier. And we are currently working on replacing many statistical indicators with a new concept of using different sources of data. But we are not doing it alone. We are working closely with the private sectors, and we have multiple successful scenarios developed and methodology being shared internationally. Today we are, or the Federal Statistic and Competitiveness Centers is actually a member of the United Nations Global Working Group on Big Data, which consists of data subject matter experts from around 75 countries working together on a future data solution that will replace the current statistical method. So what will happen? We are not waiting till the new era of data statistic comes in, but we already start working with that. And let me give you some example of the work that we've been doing on that area. We start using satellite imagery and replacing many traditional way of collecting agricultural and environment data. Planet is a company that has more than 200 satellites on orbit. And imagine 200 satellites around the orbit, and they are taking a daily picture of the Earth. And imagine with current picture recognition technologies and the AI tools, what we could do together with the private sector. So what we did with the 75 subject matter expert and Planet, we got all the data and we start analyzing the data of the satellite or the satellite imagery on to look at the environment statistic of the entire world. So we looked at the agriculture growth, we looked at agriculture declines, we looked at the water surface is really going higher or lower on a daily basis. So imagine the power of data when it happens between the public and private sectors around the world.
Yeah, so the great things can be achieved. But as the last talking point of our discussion, what would you advise public and private sector leaders to take into account when starting their data innovation journey?
My word will be an international collaboration. And that actually what already been started under the governance of the United Nations Committee of Experts on Big Data and Data Sciences for Offices for Official Statistics. So the team, the data subject matter expert team developed something called the global platforms. The global platform is built as a cloud services ecosystem to support the international collaboration and the development of official statistics using new data sources and innovative methods that help enhance and discover data insight and information and taking this to be shared globally. The United Nations Global Platforms was established as collaborative environments to work together as a global data community and actually to learn from each other. So the learning is not restricted in one area, but it's actually shared around the world. As that platforms matured for the last couple of years and the value it's delivered has increased, we've noticed a lot of private sector joining this group of data science teams. And actually there is a demand for access to these tools. And a lot of results is available actually on the site of the United Nations Global Platforms, which a lot of people can see and they can see the result of that. So today there are, based on the result that has been or the outcomes, United Nations decided to start creating regional hubs. Today we have 4 regional hubs around the world, and UAE is one of the regional hubs that facilitate this project in the use of big data and data science, to share the knowledge and actually to work on new developed methods and algorithms and tools to put trainings and the use of big data and actually work with the private sectors in the region and to develop a new indicators or a new indicator using the big data or different sources of data. This global collaboration or the international collaboration will bring actually innovative technologies and data science methods and the use of big data together. And we actually provide much needed platform to further use the data science project in the UAE and other countries. This platform will be shared. This platform will share a knowledge. It will share the methodologies. It actually will share some of the best practices that is not in the UAE, but actually what's happening around the world in terms of data innovations.
Yes, some exciting things to look forward to, I'm sure. Mohammad Hassan, I would like to thank you for the amazing discussion and for taking the time to do this interview with me. And I look forward to your session at the Data Innovation Summit in October.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.